The 80s and 90s were remarkable periods in cinema history, and these couple of decades have turned out several evergreen films that make it to top 20 or top 50 movies of all time lists, even today. Among other classics, this era was defined by B-grade movies that spanned horror, romance, and action genres, and gave us some gems on a low budget. Characterized by artistic direction, quirky plots, and quick and cheap production, B-grade action movies such as Bloodsport or Kickboxer have amassed a considerable fan following over the years. While these are just a couple of examples, today we come to you with a curated list of the top 20 B-action movies of the 80s and 90s, so buckle up and get ready to dive into a world of action and adventure, where you might hopefully stumble across a few undiscovered gems for your next movie night.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Bloodsport, 1998. Famously known as the film that shot Jean-Claude Van Damme to fame, Bloodsport is a 1998 film by Newt Arnold. The movie follows the life of an American soldier named Frank Dux, who finds himself participating in a bloody martial arts contest in Hong Kong. This contest, known as the Kumite, inspires the movie's name and turns out to be nothing short of a bloodbath, with participants who have no remorse in killing off their opponents. As things gear up, Frank Dux is revealed to be the first Westerner who might have a real shot at winning this title, but this would require facing the deadly Chong Li. Li seems to have his eyes set on Dux, and the movie gets dark and brutal in places when Li kills someone in the ring and practically gets off scot-free. Bloodsport does seem to draw some inspiration from The Karate Kid, with a plot that revolves around the underdog's supposed victory in the Kumite. To make things interesting, Duck's training is overseen by two military personnel who seem determined to stop him from competing, lest he get injured and become a liability to the government after everything they've had invested in him. Bloodsport certainly delivers some intense performances, and Van Damme does a beautiful job of bringing a sense of realism to the action sequences. These combat scenes get increasingly brutal as the competition progresses, and Bloodsport is undoubtedly a classic for martial arts enjoyers. Commando, 1985. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger in all his glory, Commando makes for a guilty pleasure watch, as Arnold steps up to play an ex-Special Forces fighter named John Matrix. Matrix seems to have made a lot of enemies during his service, but he finally settled down with his daughter Jenny. While Matrix makes a quiet life for himself, it doesn't take long for trouble to find him again, as an ex-dictator named Arius sends his goons to kidnap Jenny in an attempt to grab Matrix's attention. Soon enough, Arius doles out unreasonable tasks for Matrix to accomplish in return for his daughter's safety, but the latter's refusal to be bossed around causes a whole lot of trouble for Arius and his henchmen. Along the way, Matrix finds himself in the company of an airline stewardess who tags along in his adventures and makes an excellent companion. As far as B-grade action movies go, Commando is a breath of fresh air, and director Mark Lester does a spectacular job of adding a touch of humor to such an intense action film. As always, it's a treat to watch Schwarzenegger in action, but his humorous exchanges and insane chemistry with Ray Don Chong's character especially take the cake and become the film's highlight. Cyborg, 1989. Before Jean-Claude Van Damme shot to popularity, he picked up several B-movie roles that are now immortalized owing to his success. Directed by Albert Pyun, Cyborg is a martial arts cyberpunk film starring Jean-Claude in the lead role as Gibson Rickenbacker, an assassin who finds himself against a group of marauders amid a deadly plague. While scientists scramble to find a cure, a young girl named Pearl Prophet transforms into a cyborg to undertake a courier mission that would otherwise be impossible for a human. When she falls into danger, Gibson steps up to take care of her and eventually faces Fender Tremolo's gang of pirates after they hold Pearl captive. While he rescues her, this does not satiate his thirst for revenge against Fender, and we eventually learn that he holds a grudge against him for killing his past lover and ruining his one chance at happiness. The movie builds up to a climax where Gibson avenges his lover's death by impaling Fender on a meat hook, a fitting finale for a film where violence drives the plot, even in the middle of a plague. The sci-fi angle in Cyborg especially comes as a breath of fresh air in the pre-existing plane of B-grade action films, along with a dash of comedy and some tasteful fight sequences that make the film worth a watch. Hard to Kill, 1990. Often regarded as Steven Seagal's best action flick, Hard to Kill is a 1990 film revolving around corrupt policemen, mobs, and politicians who work in cahoots to uplift each other through unacceptable means. Unfortunately for them, police detective Mason Storm, portrayed by Seagal, soon stumbles across their plans and makes it his mission to capture them red-handed. In an attempt to ensure that all their efforts so far don't go wasted, politician Vernon Trent orders a hit on Mason's family and ends up killing his wife, while Mason himself sustains several injuries. As the movie progresses, Mason proves to be quite hard to kill and ends up in a years-long coma, while nurse Andy Stewart stays by his side and cares for him. When the time comes, Mason makes a full recovery and jumps back on his feet to go after Vernon Trent and everyone else who had wronged him. He doesn't shy away from violence and seems to have a bunch of martial arts tricks up his sleeve in order to teach his opponents a lesson. The movie consistently jumps from one action scene to another, with instances where the antagonists send civilians flying in the air and punch cupcakes, among other things, but only until Mason recovers from his coma and delivers sweet revenge. Hard to Kill certainly satiates one's thirst for bloody action and drama, and Steven Seagal does a wonderful job of breathing life into this ruthless detective character who crushes anyone in his path. Kickboxer, 1989. Introduced as a film where an ancient sport becomes a deadly game, Kickboxer was a 1989 film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme as Kurt Sloan. While Kurt typically assumes the role of the cornerman for his brother Eric Sloan, in his kickboxing matches, the movie takes us on a wild ride as Kurt eventually steps into the ring after his brother is viciously paralyzed in a fight against Tong Po. Seething with rage and fueled by helplessness over his brother's state, Kurt decides to channel all his energy into becoming a kickboxing expert so that he can teach Po a lesson. He indulges in some intense training under the watchful eye of a kickboxing trainer named Xian, and the plot picks up pace as Kurt gears up for the fight of his lifetime. As he undertakes this challenge, Kurt finds himself appreciating the beauty of Muay Thai, and his character undergoes quite a transformation as he eventually falls for his trainer's niece and realizes there's more to life than revenge. However, this doesn't distract him from his ultimate goal, and he finally emerges victorious in a battle against Tong Po, which takes up most of the film's finale. While Kickboxer is not one of Van Damme's most popular works, it has decent action and well-choreographed fight scenes that make it worthy of a watch. Roadhouse, 1989. Directed by Rowdy Herrington, this 1989 film stars Patrick Swayze in the lead role as James Dalton, a professional bouncer who's made quite a name for himself. Soon enough, Dalton catches the attention of Frank Tillman, who decides to hire Dalton at his lavish new club, the Double Deuce. While Dalton accepts this offer, he implements many changes around the club and fires several employees on charges ranging from poor performance to theft and drug dealing. His actions land him in hot water with the town's hotshot, Brad Wesley, who turns out to be the uncle of one of these fired employees. Wesley soon sends his henchmen to the club to warn Tillman and also Dalton, who suffers a few injuries in a face-off against the goons and finds himself at a hospital. In the midst of the fighting and killings, Dalton somehow manages to establish a romance with a nurse named Elizabeth, while also dealing with Wesley's attacks, and finally tracking him down to his estate. In an intense finale, Dalton decides that he must kill Wesley and get rid of his threat dangling in front of his eyes, once and for all. And in a surprising twist of events, the townsfolk show up in Dalton's support and shoot Wesley to his death before the police can get involved. As far as B-grade action movies go, Roadhouse has a gripping plot that keeps us on the edge of our seats as we try to guess Dalton's next move amid all the chaos and violence around him. The Delta Force, 1986. Inspired by the real-life events that transpired on board the TWA airplane in June 1985, the Delta Force stands apart from other films in the list, owing to the nature of the events it covers. Directed by Menahem Golan, the movie covers the hijacking of the plane by a Lebanese terrorist, while Colonel Alexander summons his Delta Force to deal with the terrorists and safeguard the hostages' lives. Alexander soon enlists the help of Major Scott McCoy, portrayed by none other than Chuck Norris, and the two open fire on hundreds of terrorists and somehow manage to emerge victorious, even when luck seems to have turned against them. While the movie starts on a slow note and focuses on the events within the airplane for most of the first half, the second half is overflowing with action as the Dynamite duo blows up numerous terrorist vehicles, and Norris' character even goes as far as to shoot rocket launchers while riding a motorbike. The movie certainly dramatizes the actual event and presents a bit of a twist at the end, but it holds a lot of promise and delivers a bunch of well-executed action sequences that have a lot of entertainment value. Above the Law, 1988. Released in 1988, Above the Law marks Steven Seagal's introduction to the world of an action hero, among other things, as he embraces the complexity of this role. The movie stars Pam Grier and introduces Seagal and Grier as Nico and Dolores, a dynamic detective duo investigating a major drug cartel in Chicago. While they arrange for a bust, higher orders from the FBI stop them from arresting a big-shot cocaine dealer, and the detectives decide to rise above the law and deal with this menace. As things unfold, we learn that Nico worked for the CIA in Vietnam, where he discovered that one of the agents was secretly smuggling drugs under the name of the agency. While Nico and Dolores' determination to bring them down seems to be the main plot, the movie has a bunch of subplots wherein political refugees hide in the basement of a church, and the church's priest reveals that the drug-smuggling CIA agent is planning to assassinate a senator. The movie has a lot going on, and many action sequences take place in unusual settings, such as the executive house of an old Catholic church in Chicago. Seagal has quite an intimidating presence, and sometimes his stern tone is sufficient to send a chill down our spines.
And this entire hotel work. I mean, there hasn't been a storm.
Universal Soldier, 1992. Once again, we find ourselves exploring another one of Jean-Claude Van Damme's classic action movies. And at this point, he should be titled as the undisputed king of B-movies. Directed by Roland Emmerich, Universal Soldier focuses on Jean-Claude and Dolph Lundgren's characters as soldiers whose bodies were cryogenically frozen by the government until they could be brought back to life under the Universal Soldier program. While they're turned into super soldiers, they struggle to adapt to their new abilities, especially when their memories resurface and lead them to question everything they have been subjected to. Over the course of the film, these super soldiers are sent off to participate in high-risk missions that promise a whole lot of action, with a dash of sci-fi and military politics. If you ask us, Universal Soldier will make a worthwhile watch if you enjoy a good old-fashioned action movie, or are a big fan of seeing Jean-Claude in action on the big screen.
How you gonna die?
Death Wish 3, 1985. While Death Wish is a popular movie series, Death Wish 3 especially takes the cake when it comes to violence and drama, and is notably known as the last film in the series to be directed by Michael Winner. The franchise revolves around a vigilante killer, Paul Kersey, and Charles Bronson has earned a lot of fame due to his fantastic portrayal of this ruthless vigilante. While he typically battles crime on the streets of New York, Death Wish 3 starts with him traveling all over the country as a vigilante after being banned from New York. However, fate seems to have other plans for him, as he eventually finds himself returning to New York to help an old friend, who sadly ends up dying in his arms quite early on in the film. While Kersey is accused of his friend's murder, the cops let him off on the condition that he must keep them looped in whenever he takes care of a criminal, and Kersey once again finds himself fighting crime on the streets of New York. While he faces a wide range of criminals, all of his encounters seem to be characterized by over-the-top fighting sequences and witty one-liners that will surely keep you entertained throughout the film. Cobra, 1986. While this Sylvester Stallone film did not get the recognition it deserved upon release, it has slowly amassed a crazy fan following and established its status as a cult classic. Directed by George P. Cosmatos, Cobra stars Stallone in the titular role and has a spectacular cast including Rennie Santoni, Bridget Nielsen, and Andrew Robinson. The movie follows the life of police detective Marion Cobretti as he finds himself in the midst of a mass shooting turned hostage crisis. While Cobretti, or Cobra, diffuses the situation by killing the shooter, little does he know that this standalone incident will soon trigger a bunch of violent crimes all over Los Angeles. At first glance, Cobra believes these incidents are unrelated, but further digging reveals that they were all orchestrated by a Darwinist cult known as the New World. As the plot picks up, Cobra faces the cult's leader, the Night Slasher, and further chaos ensues as the two accomplished fighters face each other in a nail-biting finale. While Cobra makes for a thrilling action film, it's much more than that, and has slasher horror elements, gore, and a constant stream of humor in the form of Stallone's snarky one-liners. Under Siege, 1992. Directed by Andrew Davis, Under Siege follows the life of Casey Ryback, a former Navy SEAL who works as a culinary specialist on board the USS Missouri battleship. As the title suggests, things go awry when a bunch of mercenaries make their way on board and declare siege under the command of an ex-CIA operative, William Stranix. While these intruders intend to steal the ship's nuclear warheads, Casey hesitantly stands up to protect the ship and displays his excellent martial arts skills that he's honed over the years during his time in the Navy. Under Siege especially deserves praise due to the suspenseful tone that is consistent until the very last sequence, and Steven Seagal does a spectacular job of portraying Ryback and delivering one of his best action performances to date. Best of the Best, 1989. Released in 1989, Best of the Best is one of the most popular B-grade action movies of all time. It has an inspired 3 sequels that were released over the course of the next 9 years. The film revolves around an international martial arts tournament in Korea, where our leading characters make up the American martial arts team and face a horde of obstacles on their way to victory. One of the biggest troubles appears in the form of South Korean martial artists, who show great promise in the tournament, and this film certainly delivers when it comes to professional-grade action sequences and nail-biting competitions. We can practically feel the tension through the screen as the stakes rise, and the film also has a bunch of subplots that touch upon human themes such as moral conflicts and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The movie also sheds light on the struggles faced by the team as they do their best to work together, despite the fact that they hail from different backgrounds and have seemingly unique fighting styles. It has a stellar cast, including Eric Roberts, James Earl Jones, and Chris Penn, who all do great justice to the martial arts sequences and make the movie a worthwhile watch. Missing in Action, 1984. Directed by Joseph Zito and starring Chuck Norris in the lead role, Missing in Action sheds light on the events that took place in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. While Norris's character, Colonel Braddock, escaped imprisonment in a Vietnamese war camp about 10 years ago, he eventually returned to Vietnam on a mission to find the American soldiers who had gone missing over the course of the war. The movie offset a bunch of sequels that surrounded the MIA issue, and Norris even dedicated these films to his brother, Wieland, who had lost his life in Vietnam in 1970. The plot revolves around Braddock as he leads an investigation team and arrives in Ho Chi Minh, where he finds enough evidence to trace the missing soldiers to Thailand. As he makes his way to Thailand, Braddock finds comfort in an old army friend's company, and the two of them embark on an adventure into the deep jungles of Thailand in order to free the prisoners of war. Missing in Action takes an adventurous course as Norris's character essentially undertakes a suicide mission to go back to the place that gave him several scars, but his grit and determination to save his fellow soldiers makes this film a solid watch. He faces hurdles in the form of corrupt officers and opposition by the Vietnamese military, but Braddock's sense of patriotism overrules all other emotions as he gives this mission his everything and emerges victorious in the end. American Ninja, 1985. Starring Michael Dudikoff and Steve James in the lead roles, this 1985 martial arts film follows the life of Joe Armstrong, an American soldier who suffers from amnesia. While he sticks to his post in the Philippines, Armstrong stumbles across a rebel organization that tries to steal military-grade weapons from the army base, and he gives his all to prevent them from doing so. While this seems like a tough challenge in itself, things seem to run deeper, as an arms dealer named Ortega orchestrates a plan to kidnap and train ninja warriors. While the primary plot revolves around Armstrong's attempts to get his hands on Ortega, the movie also focuses on his amnesia and sheds light on his origins as the plot unfolds. American Ninja is a must-watch for any martial arts fans, and it was such a huge hit that it inspired a number of sequels with top-notch ninja fight scenes. The movie also gives a dynamic duo in the form of Michael Dudikoff and Steve James, who plays the role of a fellow soldier named Curtis Jackson, who aids Armstrong in his quest to defeat Ortega. Marked for Death, 1990. Created by Dwight H. Little in 1990, Marked for Death is yet another B-grade action film that stars Steven Seagal in the lead role as an authority figure. Here he plays a former DEA agent named John Hatcher, who finds himself returning to his hometown in Illinois, only to find that the place has been taken over by Jamaican drug dealers. After a bit of digging, John learns that these hordes of drug dealers are led by Screwface, played by none other than Basil Wallace. While John takes it upon himself to restore his hometown's prestige, this task does not seem easy sleazy in any capacity, especially when he realizes the hold Screwface has over the drug scene in Lincoln Heights. The villainous character appears to be using fear, as well as a Jamaican syncretic religion known as Obeah, to keep things running smoothly. But unsurprisingly, John's training and sense of justice overrule Screwface's fear-mongering tactics as the film reaches its finale. The film is packed with twists and turns, as John tracks Screwface down, and there's an interesting subplot that involves a twin brother and people allegedly returning from the dead, only to lose their lives in the next fight. Showdown in Little Tokyo, 1991. Directed by Mark Lester, Showdown in Little Tokyo is a typical buddy cop action movie that stars Dolph Lundgren and Brandon Lee in the lead roles. This 1991 release follows Lundgren's character, Detective Chris Kinner, as he navigates his way through the world of crime, after being partnered with Johnny Murata. While the two seem to have different tastes, Kinner and Murata make for an excellent team while dealing with the criminals in LA's Little Tokyo area. The dynamic duo soon makes a breakthrough when they arrest someone tied to the Iron Claw Yakuza clan, which brings up bad memories for Kinner. As it turns out, Kinner was only 9 years old when a Yakuza member killed both his parents in front of his eyes, and his past fuels him to dig deeper into the Iron Claw and get his hands on their leader, Yoshida. While this may seem like a solid plot, things get progressively more interesting as Kinner is entrusted with the responsibility of saving a young woman from Yoshida. Showdown in Little Tokyo might not be as well known as other films on this list, but it is certainly one of the most well-made B-movies on such a tight budget. The film has a wonderful cast and is quite plot-driven, and the action scenes featuring samurai swords and martial art forms are just the icing on the cake. Hard Boiled, 1992. Notably known as director John Woo's last Hong Kong film, Hard Boiled is packed with some classic B-movie action cliches, such as gangster trouble, identity loss, and heroic acts of sacrifice. It follows the life of Inspector Tequila, portrayed by Chow Yun-fat, as he tries to put an end to weapon smuggling operations. Surprisingly enough, Tequila does not have to work too hard on his own, as he crosses paths with Alan, an undercover cop who has infiltrated the smuggling gang's inner ring. The two of them collaborate to bring the gang down, and Tequila's character especially wins over the audience's hearts, owing to his badass personality and refusal to do things on any terms besides his own. He's a tough guy who's unafraid of dealing with the consequences of his actions, an admirable trait for any protagonist to have. While Chow Yun-fat may have the spotlight on him for the most part, the entire cast does a wonderful job of breathing life into the script and delivers some of their best action performances. The violent face-offs and the clashes in the finale sequences make for a cinematic treat and help the film earn a guaranteed spot on every curated action movie list ever made. Lionheart, 1990. While Jean-Claude Van Damme is notably known for his action roles, Lionheart portrays Van Damme in a new light and highlights his versatility as an actor. The film follows his character, Leon Lionheart Gaultier, as he leaves his job at the French Foreign Legion to rush by his brother's side in the LA, after the latter gets into a fatal accident. While Leon makes it in time to spend a few moments before his brother's death, he soon realizes that the responsibility for taking care of his brother's family has fallen upon his shoulders. In an attempt to sort out their financial troubles, Leon enlists in a bunch of underground matches with some assistance from his friend Joshua and fight promoter Cynthia, while also evading the foreign legionnaires who are trying to punish him for deserting his post. Lionheart brings out Van Damme's soft emotional side as he goes to great lengths to take care of his family, even if it means endangering himself in the process. It has ample fight sequences wherein Van Damme showcases his physical prowess and martial arts skills, and the final scene, where he goes up against the ring's champion, Attila, especially keeps viewers on the edge of their seats.
Why did you do that?
Why?
Yeah, why?
I was having a bad day.
Like now?
Like now!
Tango and Cash, 1989. Starring Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell in lead roles, Tango and Cash follows the story of two rival police officers in the Los Angeles Police Department. While this seems to be a classic buddy cop film, there's a lot more than what meets the eye, as Tango and Cash get accustomed to working with each other despite harboring feelings of hostility toward one another. They are introduced as leading detectives in the narcotics department, and the plot revolves around their clash with Yves Perret, who devises an elaborate plan to frame the cop duo for murder. After finding themselves cornered with enough evidence to suggest they committed the crime, Tango and Cash begrudgingly accept defeat and serve time at a maximum security jail. While this situation is nerve-wracking to say the least, things worsen for them as they find themselves surrounded by criminals they had put behind bars over years of service. As this action movie turns into a prison drama, Tango and Cash takes us on a roller coaster ride and shapes up to be a classic buddy cop low-budget film that surpasses all our expectations. Marvelous verdict. From movies such as Commando and Kickboxer to Showdown in Little Tokyo, B-grade action movies are packed with a whole lot of drama and humor, along with some kick-ass fight sequences that are capable of giving us an adrenaline rush through the screen. These movies may not have a high budget or top-notch cinematography, but they're no less thrilling than any million-dollar budget films out there, and we hope you give them a watch if you haven't already gotten around to them.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
No!